Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. President Donald Trump's Arabian Peninsula tour puts in stark relief the administration's foreign policy in the Middle East. The president focused on the Gulf rather than on the Levant, and the leader of Lebanon, at least, made his pilgrimage east in order to curry favors with him. Trump's focus was clearly on the economic aspects of bilateral relations and efforts to stop or at least de-escalate violent conflicts. So, what are the central features of this policy as regards Israel, the Arab nations, Iran, and the Palestinians? Joining us for this analysis include retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmit, formerly a U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs. It's good to see you, General.
Good to see you, Jonathan.
Also joining us from elsewhere is Professor Russell Berman, formerly served as a senior advisor in the U.S. State Department's policy planning staff, currently the director of the Middle East and Islamic World Working Group at Hoover Institution at Stanford University. It's great to see you as well, Professor.
Good seeing you, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure indeed as well. And last but not least, our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, set the stage for us.
So this being the Trump administration's era, we have to look at it with very cold eyes through the prism of a balance of payments. The Arabian Peninsula can pay the United States. Conversely, what happens in Israel and the adjoining states would draw the American Treasury to cough up billions. This is not what the president believes he was elected to do. And therefore, he goes to the rich pastures, even though it's ironic, of course, talking about the desert, of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. And look who is on the list of potentates invited to meet him there. The Syrian, the Lebanese, the Palestinian, not the Jordanian king, he met him in Washington only a few days ago, not the Egyptian president, and not the Israeli prime minister.
Is the Syrian president a done deal?
Well, the Syrian president apparently called on Trump to invite him even for a 5-minute talk, because he is an astute photo op aficionado. He wants just to have a handshake and a picture, which will help him get...
But the Americans have not reciprocated that request.
Let's wait. As we are talking right now, it's a possible, not a certain.
Let's start with you, Professor Berman. I'd like to ask you specifically about the differences that are to be expected since President Trump, on his first trip during his first term, when he was the 45th president of the United States, traveled first to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We all remember that trip. It was a very robust trip and bolstered relations between Riyadh and Washington. And now, yet again, his first international trip, of course, putting aside the trip to the Vatican in light of the death of the Pope, the previous Pope. Now we're looking at a reality where he's traveling to the Middle East on his first international official tour with the intention of deepening ties with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and going also to the UAE, of course, and Qatar. What is your take on that?
First of all, his first trip is again to Saudi Arabia and not to traditional allies in Europe. That says one thing about his priorities, probably more about the judgment on Europe than it does about the Middle East. Secondly, I think we can begin to clarify the key contours of Trump foreign policy. First, it's the priority of the economic. That's the issue. It is not human rights, it's not alliances, it's not military, it's economic, and therefore he goes, as Mr. Owen pointed out, not surprising, to Saudi Arabia. Thirdly, he is very much interested in profiling himself as the peace president. He very much prefers to have outcomes that are not driven by military interventions. Whether he'll be able to avoid that or not really depends on the final point I want to mention. And this is a key element of continuity, I believe, in Trump's vision of the region, his unwavering opposition to the acquisition of nuclear weapons by Iran. This was a matter of the maximum pressure campaign in the first administration. He's been very adamant about that since then. I know there are doubts about where President Trump or the Trump administration will end up on this, but I'd be very much surprised if he were to somehow concede to Obama 2.0, JCPOA 2.0. This would undermine his political credibility considerably.
Thank you, Professor Berman. General Kimmit, your take on his first trip?
I very much agree with what Professor Berman has said. It's economics, but it's also security as well. The fact remains when the president goes over there, he's sending a very strong sign, primarily to Iran, that these are most favored, most significant allies. And as long as the negotiations are going on and the aircraft carriers remain in that area, I think it's a sign of deterrence to Iran and perhaps, hopefully, some pliability in the talks. I think there are two other issues that need to be brought up. He's visiting Qatar, and of course, Qatar, for all its sins, still sees itself as a significant player in world diplomacy. So we just struck a new deal for another 10 years to use Al Udeid as our military base, and I think in return, Qatar wants to be seen as a player on the international scene. There's a third issue of the Saudi Arabia enrichment program versus its nuclear program. We don't want to see enrichment in Saudi Arabia. We'd prefer to see a civil nuclear program where the enriched uranium is provided. And then, of course, he's going to UAE, and UAE is continuing to beat its chest about becoming the artificial intelligence capital of the region, if not one of the most prominent AI centers in the world. So he has a lot of work ahead of him. How much he'll get accomplished, I don't know, but I'll put my money on that Shar gets a photograph with him.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. I'm still skeptical, but nonetheless, everything is possible these days. Mr.
Has
Oren,
Donald Trump ever missed a photo op?
well, when I think about Ahmed al-Shara, going off topic, the first thing that comes to mind is 9/11 and Al-Qaeda. And as a New Yorker, President Trump has that same mindset when we're talking about Al-Qaeda and 9/11. I'm not sure that having that individual who joined Al-Qaeda because of getting inspired by 9/11 to fight America is somebody that Trump would necessarily eagerly want to meet. But we'll have to wait and see in the realpolitik of the Middle East how things play out. And in that context, Mr. Oren, the strategic power competition is playing here a factor, since the UAE and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia have a lot of cash, capital, and therefore, when we're talking about the capacity of China to rival the United States for that same cash, is that something that the Americans maintain in their calculus?
Well, let me just remark that, as the song said, you spoke from a New York state of mind. But Donald Trump is a Floridian now, has been for several years, staffed his second administration with many politicians coming out of Florida. And in one of his first events in the Miami area, after being inaugurated, he took part in a Saudi investment event in order to encourage Americans to welcome investments from Saudi Arabia. He is not shy about it. He wants to draw manufacturing and services, goods, whatever, into America. This is his main mission. In addition to what General Kimmit mentioned, if not the peace president, he wants right now to be the truce Trump. He's collecting ceasefires around the world: India, Pakistan, Russia, Ukraine, the US Houthis, Israel, Hamas. This is one of his achievements. We'll see whether it's sustainable. And it may get him the Nobel Prize he wants so much.
We'll have to wait and see on that department. But Professor Berman, when are we to expect a clear U.S. policy vis-a-vis the Middle East? And is that something that we are going to receive in the conventional sense, or is there going to be a lot of ambiguity and fluidity in the process?
Well, there'll be ambiguity because there's a heterogeneous team around President Trump. I would not expect a white paper, a declaration. This is our Middle East policy, and this is what we will carry out. It's going to be transactional and iterative. But as I said before, there are aspects of this that are already clear. The opposition to Iranian weaponization of nuclear power. And secondly, actually, this is the primary issue, the focus on the economy. He's in the Gulf. That's where the Middle East is. The listeners can think back. There was a time when Egypt was the center of the Middle East. There was a time when Lebanon was the Switzerland of the Middle East. All of that is in the past. Lebanon, Syria, even Egypt are secondary backwaters, really, to the flesh pots of Riyadh and Qatar. This is where the money is, and that's what he's interested in.
Gerald Kimmit, your perspective on that?
Well, I'm taken back by the term of Riyadh being a flesh pot, but I'll see what I can do from there. Yeah, I think there are perhaps some policy statements that are put out, even though they're not fully articulated policies. Number one, Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. Number two, we will continue to fight terrorism in the region. And number three, we'll try to the extent possible to reduce our military footprint in the region. Now, those are not policies, those are policy statements, but let's see how well the rest of the administration can carry those statements out.
Mr. Oren, let's bring Israel to the picture, since despite not having necessarily the capital or the available cash that the Saudis, the Emiratis, or the Qataris have, nonetheless, Israel does have a robust relationship on the economic level with the United States of America. It is its number one trade partner on innovation, which is the most potent part of Israel's economy. And many of the Israeli companies that used to be very significant Israeli companies migrated to the Americas, and they are run by Israelis, and there is a lot of interest on those levels of the economy. But nonetheless, when we're talking also about the military aspect of things, the most potent military and partner of the United States in the context of Central Command is no other than the IDF, which is now also deepening its interoperability since transitioning from the European Command to Central Command, as within its capacity to be interoperable with other nations here in the region. All of that taken into account, how do we see that being drawn in from a Trump administration perspective?
It's a very persuasive sales speech which you just gave, and I'm inclined to sign on the dotted line if you just give me a piece of paper. However, this does not necessarily align with Donald Trump's thinking. And it brings back memories of some 50 years ago, the old "Is Israel an asset or a burden?" debate, in which the then chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General George Brown, fell victim to a trap question. Israel is an asset where it does not stand in the way of American foreign policy, where when it does not try to manipulate domestic American forces, the so-called Jewish lobby, in a way which serves its interests, but not necessarily the United States. And because of Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia, this brings once again the question of what is Israel willing to give to this mixture. For instance, the horizon, not necessarily the state itself, for a Palestinian state somewhere down the road, if this is the price that MBS is asking for in order to convince his domestic audience and other Arab countries that he is not betraying the Palestinians. This also has to do with ending the war in Gaza, which right now is not the policy of the Netanyahu government, but apparently, hearing what the president has said to reporters on his way over, is the policy of the White House. And also, regarding what General Kimmit said, policy in this particular administration comes from the top down. It is not being staffed in the National Security Council, State Department, Department of Defense. The president makes policy, and his various associates, the cabinet secretaries, the advisors, he, of course, has sent the National Security Advisor, Waltz, to the United Nations, did not appoint yet a permanent replacement, gave Secretary Rubio another assignment. So we have to watch whatever President Trump says and does and try to infer from that what is the policy, including vis-a-vis Israel.
Well, with regard to the war in Gaza, I think the Trump administration and Netanyahu government are very much aligned when we're talking about the goal of both countries to see a certain solution or an outline solution that will bring about the removal of Hamas as a governing or military force in Gaza, and retrieving all of the hostages, and rebuilding Gaza into something that may prosper and for the first time in many, many years, if at all, become a stable environment to draw in certain investments and make a different future for the Palestinians.
Well, they have various varying timelines for that and
Well,
actions.
naturally they do, since the Israelis have more skin in the game than the Americans do. So each one looks at it from a different perspective. But again, within all of that said and done, the ultimate goal is to see that same outcome vitalized or realized. Now, Professor Berman, when we're talking about the complexities that Israel faces in the region, how does that align with the American policy vis-a-vis the Middle East?
Well, the policy, I suppose, that's relevant is twofold. First of all, the elimination of the Iranian threat, however that elimination takes place. And secondly, a resolution of the various conflicts that are closer at home. Gaza, of course, is a significant one, but so is the instability in Syria. The Jolani past with Al-Qaeda is one thing. Another thing is the terrible violence that has taken place against the Alawite and the Druze communities in the past month. It's unclear whether Jolani is reformed jihadi or still jihadi. Then Lebanon, there seems to be some progress being made there. Hezbollah's degradation continues. Maybe the largest question on the horizon, short of Iran, is Turkey and the nature of the competition that is emerging between Israel and Turkey, particularly in the Syrian theater.
General Kimmit? Yeah, I think this whole issue about Turkey and Israel and competition for Syria gives sort of the view. It's much like Germany after World War II, as the Russians and the Americans, the Soviets and Americans, were slicing it up your zone, your zone. Uh, I think that the view from here is that the Israelis are looking for a respectable distance, a respectable buffer zone inside of Syria, number one, and number two, want to keep an eye on Jelani to see if he doesn't return to his past. In many ways, the Turks are the same way. They don't seem to have had any aspirations on the ground other than their 30-kilometer buffer zone, which leaves about 600 miles between between the Israeli positions and the Turkish positions. Although I would say it's clear that the Turks would be more than delighted to see a Turkish-style Muslim Brotherhood government inside of Damascus. But I don't see the direct competition between Israel and Turkey happening. Now, one other area that we didn't discuss at length, which is probably the most significant challenge to the United States, is the Houthi challenge. Not because there's any direct danger right now, but the fact is that if any of our ships are sunk, that will certainly put the Houthi threat to the top of the list. And I would expect to see far more active U.S. involvement in Yemen were that to happen.
When we're talking about that specifically, naturally, Israel is not a considerable power when we're talking about its naval assets, but nonetheless, it does have a very deep-rooted relationship with the United States when we're talking about intelligence. Do you see that deepening also in the sector of Yemen?
Well, I certainly do. I think that Yemen is a candidly an enemy of both Israel and the United States. It's not just an antagonist, it's an enemy. And anytime you have that level of animosity between two countries and three countries with Israel, naturally the two allies are going to want to strengthen their intelligence sharing on that. I don't think it'll get to the point where we completely open up the secret vaults, but I would expect that with the Houthis, with the Houthi threat, we are being much, much more open with the Israeli intelligence.
Let's talk. We don't have very much time left for this, so very briefly, please, Mr. Owen, I would like still to hear both Professor Berman and General Kimmit on this, but strategic power competition is very much alive. Israel is the only nation in the region that put a hard stop on China encroaching on its strategic infrastructure, despite a faulty past on this matter. What can you tell us about that, not only within the context of Israel, but also on a regional scale?
Yes, there were voices in Israel a few years ago. Why do we rely only on the United States? We should try to have a stronger partnership with China. It's not going to happen. The Chinese, with their Belt and Road and their relationship with Iran and their African ventures, they are not a good partner for Israel.
On strategic power competition, each one of you gets 1.5 minutes. Professor Berman, we'll start with you.
Well, following up on Mr. Owen, Israel, of course, needs a policy toward Russia and toward China, but the United States is going to remain its major ally indisputably for the foreseeable future and beyond that. China is been actually fairly cautious in entering the Middle East. There's its location in Djibouti, of course. It's probably more oriented toward Africa. And apropos Africa, of course, I read this weekend of joint Egypt-Chinese air exercises. So China is showing up. Russia seems to have been pushed out of Syria, but it's going to try to come back.
General Kimmit, China was economic in essence, or focused on the economic aspects of the Middle East for decades now, and now we're seeing a certain shift, a cautious shift towards the military ventures in the Middle East, particularly on collaboration and seeking even the sale, if we saw the large sale that was done to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia following the decision by the Biden administration to halt the sale of offensive weaponry during the campaign against the Houthis in Yemen. Is that something that is still the case, and to what degree can we see an increase of Chinese involvement on that level?
Well, I think that whole issue about Chinese military transactions is exactly as you say, but it's not just China that the UAE and the kingdom engage in what I would call diplomatic transactions. I mean, the fact is that the Rafale is not nearly as good of an aircraft as anything that the Americans can produce, but yet it's sold in quantity in the Middle East simply to curry favor with the French. But regarding China, I agree that with the exception of the military exercises that were done with Egypt, the primary involvement in China right now, of China in the Middle East is economic. I mean, I work there, you know that. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting 3 or 4 Chinese businessmen.
Indeed. Well, Professor Berman, in one sentence, is the United States under the Trump administration going to become more vigorous against the Chinese in the Middle East?
I believe so. The United States recognizes that China, with an assist from Russia and North Korea, wants to push the United States out of Eurasia, and Mr. President Trump is not going to take it lying down.
Mr. Owen, closing sentence?
Regarding the Trump-Giuliani possible meeting, President Trump is the only world leader to have recognized Israeli annexation of the Golan Heights. He has recognized the annexation of Crimea. If he gets out of Giuliani, Ashara, a promise to recognize the Israeli control over the Golan Heights, this could be a very good step forward.
Good is a strong word, but we'll have to wait and see. Professor Berman, General Kimmit, Mr. Owen, thank you so very much for all of your insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.